Frid och shalom och välkommen till Parousia-studion. Vi har gjort några intressanta klipp för er att titta på här. Och vi förstår att det är väldigt allvarliga tider när ni har sett de här klippen. Och jag ska inte ta för mycket tid, utan de här klippen får tala för sig själva. En del här är bara engelska. Det handlar om en studio i USA där man bråkar alltså, och det här är ju ett tecken på vad vi har sagt, att det här kommer att splittra både familjer, församlingar och allting. Hon som har hand om det här programmet är riktigt upprörd för att vänstern BLL och de här egentligen med sina slagord förnekar förintelsen. Gud välsignar alla, Gud välsignar Israel, och vi ber för landets säkerhet, och vi ber att människor ska få upp ögonen för Jesus Kristus som frälsare. Någon annan utväg finns inte på den här jorden, för den kommer ju att ta slut en gång, den här tiden, och den tiden tror vi är nära nu. I all kaos som är så lyfter vi vår blick och tittar upp på honom som är svaret på alla människors frågor. I Jesu namn, här följer klippen, håll till godo. Vi håller er uppdaterade härifrån så gott vi kan under dagen. Guds välsignelse. Amen.
Of the operation has begun. The third offensive split the Gaza Strip down the center into two parts. Israeli forces made the first advance from the east of Gaza and advanced into the cities. The second attack started yesterday with an Israeli tank convoy and took place in the northernmost part of Gaza. Today, the third operation ended all communication and Gaza was completely surrounded, while the most violent clashes of the last period are taking place. The situation is quite critical. During this period, the Hezbollah terrorist organization intensively attacked the north of Israel, while the most comprehensive operation of the war against Hezbollah was launched. Israeli tanks, warplanes, and helicopters crossed the Lebanese border. Hezbollah has suffered a record number of casualties, and very heavy attacks continue. Quickly, without wasting time, let's start our video. First of all, it is known that in the north of Gaza, Israeli tanks and troops are advancing in an area of about 7 kilometers. Yesterday, with the destruction of tunnels belonging to the Hamas terrorist organization, Israeli forces made an advance along the northern border, but only 7 kilometers along the coastline. Today, before the start of the third operation, it was observed that Israeli forces mobilized in the north of Gaza. A large number of Israeli troops entered the area around the Erez borders crossing. With the increase in the military presence on the borderline, very intense artillery attacks started on the Beit Hanun region. In the operation in which Hamas targets were destroyed, Israeli soldiers started to advance towards the city in a short time. However, it was observed that a very large infantry battalion consisting of Israeli soldiers began to deploy in the coastal strip. I can say that the deployment of Israeli soldiers at 2 points and the deployment of a large number of infantry on 2 critical lines was actually the harbinger of a very big third operation. After the artillery shelling of the Israeli forces in the Beit Hanun area ended, infantry and armored vehicles suddenly reached the city border. Resistance groups belonging to Hamas militants opened fire on the Israeli forces, and clashes erupted on the border of Beit Hanun. Hamas militants and Israeli forces clashed intensely for about 2 hours. But as I mentioned in my last 2 videos, the Israeli army completely located the militants during this period. After a large number of drone images were sent to the pilots, the warplanes launched 66 strikes on Hamas targets. After the first clashes, Israeli troops withdrew, knowing that airstrikes were imminent. After the airstrikes, Israeli forces deployed on the edge of the city and neutralized the few remaining Hamas militants at the points where the airstrikes were launched. The Israeli army now moved one step closer to the city and gradually resumed its deliveries. During this period, a large number of airstrikes were carried out on the coastal strip, Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun. In particular, warplanes struck along the coastal line. It seems that the Israeli army will move along the coastal line in order to completely cut Hamas's connection with the sea. However, the news that shook the agenda came from the center of the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, it was observed that Israeli tanks mobilized from Be'eri Forest and its surroundings. While intense clashes continued on the northern line for 2 days, Israel's military presence around Be'eri increased considerably. However, Israeli tanks and a large number of infantry reached the border with armored vehicles. Israeli tanks entered the borderline very quickly into Gaza. As the tanks quickly advanced to the center, they were fired upon from the surrounding area, but the Merkava tanks crossed the Johor Adik area and reached the largest highway that provides transport between the north and south of the Gaza Strip, and the highway was completely closed. During this process, thousands of Israeli infantry, including armored vehicles, crossed the border. It was observed that the infantry advanced to Johor Adik Point. Hamas militants launched a strong counterattack during this process. Militants reached the Johor Adik area through 2 large tunnels. With the entry of Israeli forces into the city, the most intense conflict of the war began. Hamas resistance in the city could not be broken. The Israeli forces did not advance to the center of the city in order to avoid major casualties, but the points where Hamas attacked were identified. In a very short time, artillery units on the Be'eri border intensively hit Hamas targets. Later, Israeli forces entered the city and clashes continued for a long time despite the artillery attacks. However, dozers closed the exit points of the Hamas tunnels, and the exit parts of the tunnels were destroyed. The perimeter of the city was taken under control by the Israeli army, and a large number of mechanized brigades, tank battalions, and special forces advanced along the road opened by the Merkava tanks. Once the perimeter of the city was under control, Israeli special forces entered the city and began clearing operations. In the process, more than 40 Hamas militants were captured in preparation for an attack. During this process, it was determined that Israeli forces were fired upon from inside a building. After the troops retreated to a safe point, unmanned aerial vehicles destroyed the building belonging to the Hamas organization with armor-piercing ammunition. Before we move on to our critical topic, I would like to inform you that we analyzed the latest. Second goal of the Merkava tanks will be to advance to the coastline. The center of Gaza is now surrounded along the northern, southern, eastern, and western lines. If the tanks reach the coastline, the connection between the north and the south of the Gaza Strip will be completely severed. The reason for the entry of Israeli tanks from the north yesterday became clear with this operation. Israeli tanks advancing from the north and Merkava tanks advancing from the east will meet at the point you see on the map. After this process, approximately 50% of the Gaza Strip will be ready for a very detailed ground operation. Hamas militants in the center of the siege will have no point of escape and no line to get help. The weakening of Hamas in this process, the interruption of its supplies and the airstrikes will break its defensive resistance to a great extent. After this process, the Israeli infantry will begin to clear the north of Gaza one by one. The south of Gaza can be cleared after this process. However, if the Israeli army achieves a major success in the center of Gaza, a major operation may start on the southern front. I think that a mass attack will be launched up to the Egyptian border. On the other hand, the news of Israel's major operation prompted other terrorist groups to go on the offensive. Hezbollah militants launched several attacks on the Israeli border from southern Lebanon. Almost all of the attacks were carried out with mortars, and Hezbollah's targets were Israeli outposts. After the attacks, the Israeli ground and air forces mobilized in a joint operation. The Israeli army first started to strike the entire southern line of Lebanon. Then fighter jets were mobilized and Hezbollah targets on the entire southern border were hit. Later, Israeli tanks started to hit the targets. During this process, the Israeli army crossed the Lebanese border for the first time with helicopters and destroyed 4 Hezbollah camps. After every major Israeli operation, we see that the Hezbollah terrorist organization launches attacks from Lebanon. The number of Israeli soldiers, artillery systems, and tanks in the north of Israel has increased dramatically. With the encirclement of Gaza and the progress being made, the Israeli army may launch an operation on the Lebanese border. Israeli forces may want to create a secure buffer zone on the border to prevent possible attacks. Because, as I mentioned, if the Israeli forces make gains in the north of Gaza, the second target will be the south of Gaza. After this process, terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and Houthi may start to directly attack Israeli territory. Because Iran is trying to increase its deliveries to terrorist groups to a great extent with the increase in Israeli operations. For this reason, we see that the Israeli Air Force is organizing operations against the shipping points on the Syrian, Iraqi, and Iranian borders. The tension in the region continues to increase day by day. We will continue to convey the events in the following hours to you quickly and accurately.
To strip humanity from the people of Palestine and justify doing what Max Miller and a number of other officials in the Israeli government have said,
Max
which is
Miller
to flatten.
is an obscure Republican official. It does not matter what he says.
So every leftist, wait a minute, Robbie, every leftist in America was asked to apologize for some random protest.
They should apologize. They should apologize for their endorsement of terrorist attacks on innocent Israeli civilians, just as I am outraged by the retaliatory actions that are killing innocent Palestinian children everywhere. I care about both of these things and have said I care about both of these things over and over again. It is you and the idiotic, leftist, terrorist sympathizing people who do not care about the dead Israelis. They don't.
So I'm a terrorist.
And they've said it over and over again. Black Lives Matter has said it. The Harvard students have said it. The DSA in various locations have said it. The left endorses what Hamas did. They do. They endorse it.
The Harvard newspaper said exactly what the editorial page of Israel's major newspapers.
I don't give a Brianna.
Okay, well, that's clear that that's your opinion. But the Israeli voices in Israel who are getting killed because their fascist right-wing government decides to keep 2.3 million
The Israelis are getting killed
people.
because a terrorist group targeted them.
Emily, this is, you used to work there. Now you help Crystal and Sagar on their independent venture, but they're not normally quite that fiery. This issue has really divided people. And I have to say, what she's saying is absolutely outrageous to me. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous to me. What sane person questions, oh, the decapitated baby lie, the rape lie? What the hell does she know? She's suggesting women date. How does she know anything? That's just absolute, that's Holocaust denialism. That's what that is.
Classic warfare. The NATO task force currently being assembled in the Eastern Mediterranean appears to be the largest naval force ever assembled in the history of the region. More than 50 warships from 11 countries are in the waters of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea for the first time since 1945. Okay, so this is the largest naval force ever assembled in the Eastern Mediterranean, guys. More than Desert Storm, more than the wars in the early 2000s. I mean, this is historic. Okay, this is historic, and we have CNN quoting U.S. sources that the U.S. Marine Corps Rapid Response Force has been dispatched to the Eastern Mediterranean. This is the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which has 2,500 Marines and 2 amphibious assault ships. And it was previously staying in the Red Sea. So now they're going to move up into the Eastern Mediterranean through the Suez Canal. 2,500 Marines. Mediterranean. That is huge news, okay? We currently have a nuke sniffer plane operating in the Mediterranean, and it flew all the way towards Israel, which is very interesting. This is the first time I've ever seen a nuke sniffer plane fly in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is very, very interesting, and my guess is that it's probably being used to detect any kind of nuclear submarines operating in the Mediterranean, maybe Russian or some other country, because we do have 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in this area here. And here's a closer look at that nuke sniffer as it was flying in the Mediterranean. In the Eastern Mediterranean, you can see it flew all the way towards the Gerald Ford strike group, which is operating right here in this area just southwest of Cyprus. And then it flew back slowly, and it was doing this zigzag pattern here. Okay, and actually in this area right here, just southeast of Sicily, is where we have the Dwight Eisenhower. I was able to find the location of the Dwight Eisenhower, and here we have a C-2 Greyhound. This is a plane that's used to resupply aircraft carriers, and I found it this morning on the flight tracker, and it flew from Sigonella, and then it landed on the aircraft carrier right here. So let me just show you a little closer where this is. So you can see it took off from Sigonella, and then it landed right here in the middle of the ocean, which obviously there's no bases in the middle of the ocean. So it landed probably on the Dwight Eisenhower, okay, which is the second U.S. aircraft carrier that's supposed to be going to the region. And this aircraft carrier is actually going to be going to the Persian Gulf, not the Eastern Mediterranean like we initially thought. They said they were going to send another one to the Eastern Mediterranean. It's actually going to be going just south of Iran, and it's going to take another 4 or 5 days for it to get there. Okay, here's a closer look when it was landing. This is a C-2 Greyhound. They bring supplies to aircraft carriers, okay, mail, food, whatever. And you can see it landed right there on the aircraft carrier. So I just measured the distance from where it is now approximately to the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, and it's about 4,000 to 5,000 miles away from where it's going to be positioned. Okay, so if you do the math, that's about 4 days, 5 days. All right, so we're looking at the end of this week for the time when all hell could break loose in the Middle East. Israel's going to probably want to wait for this aircraft carrier to get close to Iran in case Iran tries to do something stupid. We have all the assets we need in the region to deal with that. Okay, same thing with the Houthi rebels. If we have to fly sorties into Yemen and bomb them, we need to have an aircraft carrier here. Okay, so I think what Israel's going to do now, the next couple of days, They're going to move slowly, deliberately. We're not going to see any massive incursion like we did Friday night. I think that's going to come this coming weekend. Okay, this coming weekend, end of this week is when we're going to see that happen, in my opinion. Once this aircraft carrier gets over here near Iran is when things are really going to start to kick off, and we're going to see the main event. Okay, Friday night was just the, I guess, the introduction, okay, the initial stages. All right, but the main event is still yet to come, and I will be covering the main event 24/7, okay? So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit the bell icon under the video here so you can get notified when I do these updates, and also when I go live, when I do the 24/7 coverage. So we have the chief of staff of Iran's armed forces. This is Iran's top general, saying that if Israel acts rationally, it should accept the ceasefire immediately and gain some time through negotiations. Wow. Some very, very strong words there from the top general of Iran, saying gain some time through negotiations, basically threatening Israel and saying that war's coming and we're going to attack you, so you better negotiate. That might actually buy you some time before we attack you. You know, crazy, crazy times we're living in. The Biden administration is preparing for the war between Israel and Hamas to spill into the Middle East, and is focusing on ensuring adequate protection for U.S. forces in the region, U.S. and Israeli officials told Axios. All right, so this is why the ground invasion took so long to start, because Israel wanted to make sure all U.S. forces were in the region, which they're not, but most of them are, okay? But before the real things kick off, they want to wait for everything to be in position, and also for the hostages to potentially be released, or maybe some way they can get in there and get those hostages out. But the main event is coming, guys, okay? So make sure you're prepared. The U.S. is working to send a strong message of deterrence to Iran as concerns of a wider regional conflict escalate, the White House said Monday. We're certainly going to act if we have to continue to protect our troops and our facilities. We have proven that we will strike and act to do that, and that's a strong message that Iran needs to take away. We take those responsibilities seriously, said John Kirby, National Security Council coordinator. We also take our national security interest at large in the region very seriously, which is why the president has now employed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups. We've got to make sure we send a signal to all actors, not just Iran, but all actors, certainly Iran included, that we will take our national security interest very seriously. We will protect and defend our troops, and we'll do it at a time in a manner of our choosing, he told CNN, okay? And this is coming just a day after Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, said that Israel has crossed the red lines and it may force everyone to take action. This was yesterday. I reported on that. So the White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby saying some strong words today, saying that the U.S. is going to take our national security interests very seriously. So it doesn't look like the U.S. is going to back down by any means. The Pope called for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas yesterday and repeated his call for the immediate release of hostages. And a top Vatican official spoke by telephone on Monday with the Iranian foreign minister, Abmira Dolahein. And this is that crazy foreign minister in Iran that always says those crazy things. The Vatican said in a statement that the Vatican's foreign minister, Archbishop Paul Gallagher, expressed serious concern in the Holy See about what is happening in Israel and Palestine, emphasizing the absolute necessity to avoid widening the conflict and to reach a 2-state solution for a stable and lasting peace. The World Bank reported Monday that oil prices could be pushed into uncharted waters if the violence between Israel and Hamas intensifies, which could result in increased food prices worldwide. Indermit Gill, the World Bank's chief economist, said Russia's invasion of Ukraine has already had disruptive effects on the global economy that persist to this day. If the conflict were to escalate, the global economy would face a dual energy shock for the first time in decades, not just from the war in Ukraine, but also from the Middle East, Gill said. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said that the events in Ukraine and the Middle East may result in war in Europe. Okay, so the German Defense Minister saying war in Europe could come because of the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. And Jordan is asking for more Patriot missile systems. And this is in addition to the 11 Patriot missile systems that the U.S. is sending to the Middle East right now. And Jordan wants additional Patriot systems. Okay, so this is a big red flag that things are about to get crazy, guys. Okay, you don't move 11 Patriot missiles somewhere, 11 Patriot missile systems somewhere, unless you expect some crazy event to take place. Okay, just think about how effective one Patriot missile system was in Ukraine. Okay, just one Patriot missile system that was placed in the capital of Ukraine was a game changer, and it started to shoot down all Russian missiles, and it even took out Russian hypersonic missiles multiple times. The Russians fired their Kinzhal hypersonic missile at the Patriot system, and they fired like 3 different types of missiles. They fired like an Iskander, a Kinzhal, and also like a KH-55 air-launched cruise missile. They fired like their 3 best missiles at the Patriot system, and it shot down all of them at the same time. Okay, and that was just one system. Okay, one system had that effect on the war in Ukraine. Imagine what 11 systems would do. Okay, so you don't move 11 systems for no reason, and Jordan is asking for more. All right, Hezbollah leader Nasrallah will be giving a speech on Friday, November 3rd, that's this Friday at 3 p.m. local time. And this is his first public speech since the onset of the war. So he could declare war on Israel or give some kind of ultimatum. So that we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But it looks like everything is lining up. All the stars are lining up for something to go down this weekend. Okay, the aircraft carrier will be in position. The Hezbollah leader is going to make a statement. So more U.S. equipment is going to be going in. So this weekend looks like it's going to be the main event. Syrian state media is reporting that the headquarters of the 112th Mechanized Brigade of the Syrian Army in the city of Nawa has been attacked by Israeli combat aircraft, which resulted in significant damage and casualties. Okay, so the Israeli Air Force launched airstrikes on the headquarters of the 112th Mechanized Brigade of the Syrian Army. So the Israeli Air Force literally attacked the Syrian Army, guys. Okay, this war is spreading already. Okay, it's already starting to spread. We now have Israel attacking the Syrian military, not just the militias that are there, the Iranian-backed militias, the terrorists. They're not just striking the terrorists anymore. They're going after the military as well. All right. Syrian media reported that near the Syria-Iraq border, American fighter jets destroyed a convoy belonging to Iranian militias last night. Apparently, they were moving weapons into Syria. Okay, so the U.S. launched an airstrike on a convoy full of weapons. And Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, spoke today with his Qatari counterpart about freeing the hostages held by Hamas. And Qatar is trying to speak with Hamas and work out some kind of a deal. So maybe they're going to have some kind of a deal for these hostages. The Israeli military said on Monday its troops have killed 4 prominent Hamas operatives as part of its expanded ground operations in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Forces, in a statement, provided the following names of killed Hamas members: Jamil Baba, commander of Hamas naval forces in its Central Brigade, Muhammad Safadi, commander of the anti-tank missile unit, Muamman Hijazi, a prominent operative in Hamas's anti-tank missile unit, and Muhammad Audallah, a senior operative in Hamas's production department. The Israeli military also said it destroyed terror infrastructure, including anti-tank missile launchers and other launch pads. Israeli air forces launched an overnight operation against armed Palestinian groups in the West Bank. They reported new operations against armed Palestinian groups in the West Bank, as the Palestinian Ministry of Health said 4 men were killed in an Israeli air and ground operation in Jenin. The Israeli military said the Jenin operation was one of several carried out across the West Bank. Others took place in Hebron and in various villages across the territory. Israeli forces had located and destroyed what they said was a booby-trapped observation post, as well as a vehicle in which ammunition and military equipment were found. All right, so Israel is now fighting on multiple fronts, okay? They have to deal with these sleeper agents in the West Bank. They have to deal with Hamas in Gaza. They have to deal with the Syrian army, which is potentially launching some of those missiles and rockets into northern Israel, along with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon as well. And then you also have the Iranian militants or militias that are operating in Iraq and Syria. Okay, and then that's not including Iran itself and all the military that they have, and then possibly Turkey could even get involved and attack Israel. So Israel's fighting on like 5 fronts right now: West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. Okay, so this is not good. Okay, the Israeli Air Force says it attacked about 600 Hamas targets over the weekend, and Israel appealed to foreign journalists to immediately leave the northern part of the Gaza Strip due to the increased scale of the military operation. And the firefighting service in Israel says that it's announcing a general state of emergency and general mobilization throughout all of Israel due to the imminent danger of the expansion of the threats at all fronts. Okay, so the firefighting service in Israel declaring a state of emergency and a general mobilization. All right. There's been rumors that U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drones have been operating over Gaza. Let me show you some flight paths here. So here we have the suspected MQ-9 Reaper drones that may have been assisting Israel. These are armed drones, okay? These are armed, so they could be armed. They don't have to be, but they're capable of being armed. And here we have a bunch of C-17s and NATO transport aircraft moving more equipment and supplies and weapons and ammunition and personnel into the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, you know, look, 12+ Patriot missiles, 50+ warships, hundreds of military transport planes, all of this in the Eastern Mediterranean, guys. I mean, this is insane. The buildup is insane. And a Hamas spokesman told the Financial Times that the organization did not expect this response from America after the October 7 attack, adding, "What we see now is the U.S. entering the war, and we did not expect that." According to Global News, Canadian Special Forces, including elements of Joint Task Force 2, are currently on the ground in Israel to assist in the security of the Canadian Embassy and its staff, as well as to provide an advisory role to the Israeli Defense Forces alongside other foreign special forces already in the country. Israeli media is saying that Hezbollah has started using their long-range rockets. And earlier today, a U.S. Special Operations plane, the C-146A Wolfhound, landed at Hamat Air Base in Lebanon and Larnaca Airport in Cyprus. And this aircraft is used to provide U.S. Special Operations Command flexible and responsive operational movement of small teams and cargo. All right, so maybe they dropped off some U.S. tier one units in Lebanon, possibly. The Lebanese prime minister is concerned about a full-blown war in the Middle East. I see that there is a real race between a ceasefire in Gaza and escalation, because escalation is not only affecting Lebanon, and I fear that escalation will spread to the whole region, plunging the Middle East into chaos. Okay, that's what the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Najib Mikati, said in a video interview with AFP TV. And Hezbollah and its affiliated groups attacked the city of Haifa with rockets from southern Lebanon last night. The Associated Press reports that the Lebanese army says its troops have discovered 21 launchers on its side of the blue line near northern Israel. That's the border with northern Israel. And dismantled them. It said one of them was equipped with a rocket ready to be fired. So the Lebanese army basically dismantled 21 rocket launchers that were probably set up by Hezbollah. The Russian Defense Ministry reports that they shot down 8 Ukrainian Storm Shadow missiles targeting the Crimean Peninsula last night. And the Russian Security Service detained a citizen of the Russian Federation in Sevastopol on charges of high treason. And apparently he was providing Ukraine with information about the defense fortifications of Crimea. And the date for discussion in the Turkish parliament on the possible adoption of the protocol on Sweden's accession to NATO has not yet been set. Okay, so the Turkish parliament has not decided on a date to vote on Sweden's accession to NATO. We know that the president of Turkey already ratified it, but the Turkish parliament has to ratify it, and then Hungary has to ratify it. So there's still some obstacles for Sweden's accession to NATO. And here we have a NATO radar plane operating in Latvia. And this is very concerning. There's been a lot of NATO reconnaissance activity in the Baltics the last 3 weeks. There's been a lot of high priority reconnaissance planes flying in this area. There's been also Russian cargo planes, military cargo planes going into Kaliningrad. So we have to watch this area very carefully, guys. It's possible that when things kick off this weekend in the Middle East, when the main event happens, that we could see Russia try to take advantage of the situation and maybe attack Lithuania from Kaliningrad and from Belarus. Russia has forces in northern Belarus here. Okay, so we'll have to watch this area and see what happens. But that's